Good morning. You know, it's kind of fake. You know that when you're set up for it? Yeah, that's okay. I forgive you. That's all right. All right. So if you just kind of stumbled in here today and or you're a guest of ours, you may not know exactly what the Well Project and what some of the anticipatory comments were early on. My job this morning is to tell you a little bit of how we got to where we are and where we are. And it all has to do with a church that has been around for some time, but has grown really rapidly in the last couple of years. And I want to tell you, like, where Jesus is and all that. And then we're going to tell you a little bit of where we go from here. So, for the next few minutes, let me catch you up to where we are and what this looks like right today. So, 20 years ago, my wife Elfie and myself and our 3 children arrived in Phoenix with a longing in our hearts to start a new church in this city. At the time, statistics were this. Phoenix was a city of about 4 million people or so. And if every single seat in every single church on a Sunday morning was filled, there would be room for 4% of the population of Phoenix to fit in those chairs. Isn't that something? And so, with that and just a sense in our hearts that we wanted to be part of growing a community of people who would love Jesus, grow to know who he is, and begin to think like him so they would be mistaken for him. We moved to the city and we didn't know anybody. We kind of landed here as a pioneering church plant in the northwest part of our city. And, when you're a pastor of a church, but you know, the church is not a building, well, we didn't have one of those, that didn't matter. But if you're a pastor of a church and you don't have any people, you're actually not a pastor of anything. My neighbors called me the virtual pastor. That's what they called me, right? Because we didn't really have a group of people we'd gathered just yet. So what do? When this is on your heart to do, you go meet people, right? So we would go to coffee shops and different places like that, but we weren't really meeting our broader neighbors. And so we decided, well, why don't we go door to door? Well, here's why we don't do that, because we don't want to be associated with people who do that kind of thing, right? I don't want to be associated with people who are selling something or have a religious fervor that's, prompts them to do that. But we thought, we don't have any options. I guess we'll do this. So we had this grand idea that through the course of the first summer that we would hear, summer, door-to-door summer, keywords, we would walk through a neighborhood in our area where we lived, and we would pray. We would pray for every family, every home. If there were toys out front, we assumed there were children living there, and we prayed for those children. And the next morning, Saturday mornings, Elf and I would get up with a clipboard in our hand and stand across the island in our kitchen, and we would cry because we just didn't want to do this. We did not want to do this. But we didn't know what else to do. What do you do? And so we would walk out the door with a courage and a boldness we really didn't have, and we would knock on doors. And for those that did come to the doors, we said, we're starting a new church in the area, and we really want to learn something from you. Are you currently part of a church family? If they said yes, we said, what do you love about your church? What's just the best about your church? And they gave us answers. And there's a lot of people who love their church families. They gave us answers that, it's our kind of our church family for many generations, or we love the pastor, or the kids area is just perfect for us, and we love our church. That's fantastic. That's really great. And if they said no, they didn't go to church anywhere, and there were a lot of people who didn't, right? We would ask them, so why is it, do you think people don't go to church? And we got educated. Now, some of the things we learned weren't that surprising to us. They said things like, honestly, it's like the most boring hour of my week. So why would I go, right? Or they said, I find I'm more guilty, feel more guilty when I go than when I don't go, so I'm not going, right? And many of them talked about some bad, disheartening experience they'd had with God, and they associated church with that, or a bad experience with a church, and they just didn't want anything part of it. But the number one reason that people gave us why they didn't think people in the community, usually themselves, didn't go, was because of this. The church is in our community. They say they're for our community. In fact, they put community in their name, like Copper Hills Community Church, but they do nothing for our community. We wouldn't miss them if they were gone. In fact, it gets to this at some point. They do bake sales and garage sales and cookie sales and all these sales, and they want us to be part of that so they can send their kids to camp. But it's not about us. And we really wouldn't miss them if they weren't here. Now, that might be overstated, but we didn't ask people to be anything other than truthful with us. At the end of visiting those 600 homes that summer, Alfie and I and the few people that had now kind of become part of our core said, that's just not what Jesus is like. When you look at the story of Jesus, he didn't wait for people to come to him. He went to people, and he noticed them, and he took interest in them, and he personalized himself to them. And he would travel around from place to place, and he would engage people on a personal level. And an interesting thing happened, that once people had met Jesus, he was so magnetic and he was so attractive, and the message that he gave was so beautiful and powerful and authentic that they just start to flock to where he was. And he literally, in 3 years, he radically changed the mindset and thoughts for people of who God really was. And then Jesus says this interesting thing. He says, my church is meant to be an exact representation of me. It's supposed to be so that it's mistaken for me, so that people love to have the church in their community, because even on a social level, it makes a difference in the community. But on a much deeper level, they're purveyors and givers and conduits of the hope of the universe. They are. And they ought to be the most transformative, powerful, effective, amazing group of people that would be mistaken for Jesus Christ, how they are in their neighborhoods and where they work and so on. And we just said, that's Jesus, with your help, that's what we want to become. In whatever fashion that is, that's what we want to become. So we started and got a little bit of traction over the first 10 years or so. We invested ourselves heavily in the community and the school that we were meeting at, and we saw the effects of transformed lives in amazing and wonderful ways. At about the 10-year mark, we were at a place where we were looking for some property to potentially get out of the portable church setting and into a more permanent home. And we found this piece of property right in the middle of a community that was growing, right in the bullseye of the community where 30% of us walk or bike to our gatherings. It's really a cool thing. But once we bought the property, that question came to our minds again. What kind of church family are we going to be? Are we going to be the kind of church family that people love to have the church in their community? Are we going to embrace our community? Are we going to serve our community? Are we going to be mistaken for Jesus Christ in this community? Well, if we're going to build a building, maybe the building could be like a tool for that purpose. And so who tells you how to build a building like that? Insiders build insider kind of buildings. Right? They build it for themselves. But what would it look like to go ask our community what kind of building they would see as their building? So I set up some times to meet with some of our civic leaders, our mayor and our councilwoman and the principal of the high school, the HOA president, and some others. And after speaking with all of them, in one way or another, they all were saying the same thing. They said this, don't build an academic facility, like a school or something like that. There are lots of schools, private schools, public schools, charter schools, home schools. There's lots of facilities in our community. We probably don't need another academic facility. Don't build an athletic facility, like the multi-purpose gymnasium kind of thing. There are lots of gymnasiums and athletic opportunities in our community. Middle school gymnasiums, high school, community sports, all that kind of thing. And by the way, there's a world-class, Jesus-loving church just up the way that every week 5,000 kids play soccer and do a variety of other athletic things that are influenced for Jesus. We don't need more of that in another setting. But what we don't have in our community is a facility that could help develop and grow the artistic interests of our children and our students and as adults. Why don't you build something that looks like a performing arts center? We thought, wow, that's great. We know nothing about that. So we hired an architect. And we said, why don't you go visit the Arizona Broadway Theater? They kind of have what we're thinking about. Like where you can do like theater and you can do concerts and you can do those kinds of things. So he went, he looked, and he designed the first phase of a performing arts center. And you're sitting in like the partial phase 1 of that performing arts center in the seats. The building across the way over there is got a dual purpose. It is meant to serve our kids and our office staff and so on, but it's also potential studio space and artistic space and that kind of thing. So that's what we kind of designed and developed. Well, we opened this facility 2 years ago, and we had not expected the kind of growth and influence that we have experienced, and we're thrilled for it. Can I show you what's happened attendance-wise in the last 20 years that we've been around? In 1998, there was less than 100 of us. And, that's kind of that wave. Well, it's that last part, that black line, that's created a bit of a challenge for us. A wonderful challenge, by the way, right? But that's the kind of growth that we've experienced in terms of people using our campus. The upside as well with that is our giving has increased as well, and there's a real sense of health financially. And so as we have grown these last few years, we're looking at some of the challenges that brings to us, and we want to solve those. At the same time, that vision, that dream that we have for a performing arts center still burns within us. An interesting thing happened while we were looking for this facility and designing it. I was reading through a passage in John. This is John's account of Jesus' life, his eyewitness account. He gets to chapter 4, and he says that he tells us about an incident that happened early on in Jesus' ministry. Jesus is going from Jerusalem up to the northern part, Galilee, which was kind of his northern headquarters, and he chooses to go the atypical route. Rather than going around the perimeter, he goes through enemy territory, so to speak, Samaria, and at late in the afternoon, on the first day of his trip, sends his disciples into town. He stops at a well, and he's going to take a rest. He's probably going to get some water. There's no way to draw the water out. And lo and behold, if it wouldn't just happen, a woman comes out from town to get water for herself and probably her family. And while she's there, Jesus asks her to get him some water. There's a whole bunch of elements, context to that. We're going to talk about that in the weeks ahead. But here's the interesting thing is Jesus notices her. And then he takes interest in her. And he begins a dialogue and a questioning time with her and finds out about her, and she pushes back on who he is. And through the course of that simple conversation, he kind of reveals enough about himself and her, and she finds safety in him. And she realizes that the thing that he's promised, which was not water, but living water, is real for her. She runs off to town and tells some people that she knows. They all come back out to see what she's talking about to meet this guy. And in the end, Jesus sticks around for a couple of days. And the story ends this way, that, they turn to him and say, we heard from her what you had done. We came out, we saw for ourselves, but now we believe you, not because of her encounter with you, but our own encounter with you. And I began to think with that performing arts idea that our civic leaders talked about, and with Jesus meeting this woman at a well, what if the performing arts were really a well that people would come to develop their artistic skills and abilities, but then they would walk away with living water. They would encounter Jesus Christ through the arts. But not just through the arts and the excellence of artistic training and development, but through the lives of the teachers that would be teaching them, people who love them, people who take notice and interest in their lives and invest themselves in them. Might they, through the attractiveness of coming to learn the guitar, develop the love of Jesus through their guitar teacher. They would develop the love of Jesus, go home to tell their family, their siblings, mothers, fathers, and they would come back, and collectively as a family, their lives would be transformed by the living water. If that happened home after home, family after family, what would the Northwest Valley become? It's remarkable what Jesus is able to do. He really is. So we want to address some of the challenges that this growth has occurred, and it's really in 5 areas. One of them is on our kids area. We simply don't have enough room over there to expand and grow the existing ministries that we have right now. Right today, if you talk to Pastor Kevin, our family life director, you say, what do you need? He said, I need to develop our kids' space so that we can give age-appropriate training so that we have 9 age groups, 9 classrooms. Do you know how many we have? 5. We have no place to do those other 5, and this is an urgent need that we have to expand some space for our kids. We really do. Never mind, if you've ever checked your kids in at the registration area over there, if you're kind of new, it takes a little longer to get all the information, okay? Service is half over by the time you get in here, really. And the first half is the best half, right? Yeah. So our kids, our students are the same way. Right now, we've been meeting with our middle school, high school together, but there's just too many kids, and that's a wonderful thing. So we're kind of staggering them right now. So middle school meets first and high school meets next because we have really one room that works well for them. And so if you're a parent of a middle school and high school student, you're going to drop your middle school student off, pick them up, drop your high school student off, come back again the third time to pick up your high school student. That's just the reality. What if we could stack those and they each had their own place of ministry, their clubhouse, their area of ministry? Yeah, but we don't have a room for that. And so we need to think about how do we develop that space. Third area is offices and administration space. Currently, we have 2 private offices and 4 or 5 workstations. We have recently hired another staff person who will, Lord willing, be here in a few months, and his office officially is his car. We haven't told him this yet. So we've got to find some space for him someplace. Bless Pastor Kevin's heart. He says, well, I'll just make my office down in the kids' area. Well, no, you can't do that because we need that space for the kids. Well, maybe, Kevin, your office will be in your car. We just need some space. We do. Okay. Least important space, but we need space. Also, by the way, the parking lot, the graveled area over here, we need to finish that so the city likes us and they're happy with us. But then there's opportunity. Like social media is important, right? Like we all use it. Can I tell you there's something more important than social media? It's social space. The opportunity to actually be together, to share life together in huddles and to enjoy one another's company over a coffee and those kinds of, that kind of space is so vital for us. Well, if you've ever noticed between the months of May and about September, when the service is done, people go out and make their way to their car because you can't really be out in that plaza area. It's just too hot. However, from October to April, something different happens. It's obvious. We linger out in that plaza area and we talk. I just experienced it after the first service. 3 people huddled together praying for one another. I don't know what they were praying for. I hope they were praying for me, but I don't know. They were praying for something. It's a place where we encourage each other over a cup of coffee. That's critical space. We don't have that space when it's hot, so we need to develop that. But what we want to do is we want to intentionally add a coffee shop that could be open to our community, kind of isolated from the rest of the building when the rest of the building isn't in use, so that our community could see this as like a third place where I go grab a cup of coffee in the morning, or I bring my kids for a gelato and soda in the evening, whatever it would be, but it becomes a third place where people can come. And then on Sunday, when we're together, we open up some doors and the cafe, coffee shop becomes available. It's a social space. If you're like an old church person, okay, like way back, used to call that fellowship, right? But it's gathering around together to mutually encourage each other. But it's really the center of the arts piece. We need to do some things here so that we're really a fully functional center of the arts, so that we can do guitar lessons, we can do piano lessons, voice lessons, but we can also do media arts here as well. And we can see that develop. We also thought, what if we did some culinary art kinds of things? There's an attractiveness and an appeal for that. So what it becomes, we don't know. But it's a great opportunity to leverage the arts. Do you know who the original creator is? This is not a trick question. It's the God of the whole universe. And he instilled creativity in each one of us as well. But that creativity in many ways has been stolen by our culture. And we're taking it back. We are going to take the arts back. for the one who's the original creator of the art, to glorify him, to make his name famous, to use it as a vehicle for the gospel in this world. If you were to go back 500 years to a time called the Reformation, you might be familiar with, some of you might even have been there, who knows? The gospel message was presented and given to the world through the arts. Through painting and sculpture and music and poetry. It was the vehicle that God used to let the world know in a dark, dark time that there was still life, there was still hope, it was still Jesus Christ. We want to use the arts for that purpose, to do that for his fame. So, that's kind of how we got here. That's where we are. Now I want to introduce Dennis Kalick to you. Dennis heads up our team. There have been 2 teams that have been working. Dennis heads up our team that looks after kind of sharing the vision with our church family and the funding of how we do that. There's another team that's been working on the design and the budgeting side of things. So, Dennis, tell us a little bit of kind of, here's where we are, where are we going, what do we do?
All right, thank you, Brad. Good morning, church family. I just want to take a minute and just show you some ideas, some plans that we have to meet some of the challenges that Brad pointed out to us, and looking to the future. So here's the areas that Brad touched on: children, students, administration, and parking lot. These are all the current areas that we have some challenges. And then I want to talk a little bit about the vision with the cafe, the lobby, and the Center for the Arts. Next slide, please. So currently, the lineup for the children's ministry, as you can see here, there's 5 rooms being used, and this is how the children are broken down. The new lineup, or the new process or procedures that the church wants to put in place, is to break this down even further, to put the kids more in line with either age groups or grade groups. In addition, that would take 7 rooms, and then we would need 2 large areas for gatherings. After the children, toward the end of their time together, they would gather to either do like a puppet show or a small worship service, a small gathering for each of those grade groups. So in order to accomplish this, next slide please, this is the first floor of the administration building. You would walk into this entrance here, and this is right now becomes a real choke point, because right here there's an office. That office is been removed, and it comes down here and becomes a larger classroom. And this becomes now a larger lobby with a check-in counter right here. These rooms right here are enlarged, and the same way with this. This wall's been removed for a larger room. Next slide, please. On the second floor of the same building, this would be a new addition onto the building, and this would be the second floor. We would add 3 large classrooms here, and also lavatories that would take care of the second floor. These rooms over here currently exist. This one right now is used by the youth, and this is one used as a multi-purpose classroom / meeting room. Next slide, please. As Brad mentioned, in our youth ministry, the students are meeting right now. They're on a shared space. They meet between 5 and 7 and 6 and 8. And you could see there's a 3-hour span there if you've got children in both the junior high and high school. Plus, again, it's shared space. Proposal is to move to a separate space, and they would be both meeting at the same time between 6 and 8. Next slide, please. And how that would be accomplished, there's an addition onto this building here, the auditorium on the back side. This would be the first floor. This would be like a mini auditorium. It has 150 seats with a small stage. It could be used for gathering and or for performances, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then on the second floor, there'll be some additional space. This is a very large room that has a divider wall that can be used as a classroom or function as an activity room. Next slide, please. Administration, as Brad mentioned, we have some challenges there. Currently, there's 2 administrative offices on the second floor, 2 workstations for staff, and then some workroom space for 3 staff members. The recommendation is to move this entire operation down to the first floor of the new addition. For better visibility logistically, that makes obvious sense. People walking into the church, they want to go to the office, it's right there, right off the parking lot. We're adding 5 new offices and a small conference room. So this is where this is located, on the first floor of the addition. As you can see, you walk in from the parking lot to a small reception area. Here's the conference room, and then these 4 offices, plus this one here, 5 additional offices, and then there's some workstations in the middle. Next slide, please. Brad talked about the parking lot. This is the existing parking lot that's pretty much just all dirt. Right now, that would be resurfaced, and it would be required anyway, because as we expand the space, the occupancy in these facilities, the code's going to require more parking, so that's just a natural for us to go ahead and do that. Next slide, please. So we talked a little, Brad talked about the social space. This checkered area right here, or slashed area, is the lobby of this building right here. This is the conditioned space that we use most of the time. This out here is the patio area, and then this is the coffee, this would be the coffee or cafe. This will become enclosed, air-conditioned space, and then the coffee shop will have sliding glass panels, which will open up, so you'll be able to have a flow of traffic in and out of the coffee shop, plus conditioned space, so that'll be able to be used not only just for a gathering area, but also you can have small functions in there without having to use a much larger room. Like they do now, if there was a much larger gathering, they have to go and take all the chairs out of here and reconfigure it. This way, that can be handled right in here. Next slide, please. We talked about the Center of the Arts, how to accomplish the needs for that. Where I'm standing right now is right here at the end of the stage. This wall right here is this wall right here. On the back side of this, it will be added onto this building. This becomes the new stage, and then this is the backstage area where for curtains, props, things of that nature. So this would be added onto the back of this building to accomplish that. On this side over here is the addition that I talked about earlier, which would have a mini auditorium. This would lead right off of the lobby here into a small room, could be used for media arts. And this is a small meeting room right here that could be used for small gatherings, small meetings, prayer. The team could be using that. Next slide, please. This is the basement that would go underneath the stage. This is very critical because as we continue to grow, storage becomes a very critical area, especially with props and things like that. And this down here would be like dressing rooms, prop storage. This would be a lift that would be able to give us access and raise equipment from the storage area up to the stage. This is the second floor of that addition. This would be that large room that has a collapsible wall here in the middle that we can open up to be a larger room. These mini rooms here could be used for private lessons, voice lessons, instrumental. These would be designed for that particular acoustically arranged so that they deaden the sound. So these would be small mini rooms here, and then access to this area up here is a bridge, and I'll show that here in a minute. There's a bridge that will go from the administration building over to this new addition. Next slide, please. So to give you an idea on how all this works, this is the first floor of the administration building. This is the second floor of the administration building. This is the auditorium, and this is the addition to the back of that. This is the basement that would go behind underneath the stage. This is the second floor of the auditorium, which is pretty much just bare space, and this is the second floor of the addition. So what does all of this look like? How does this all together? What kind of appeal would this have? This is a picture of what the outside of the church will look like as you're walking in from the parking lot. This is the patio area that's been totally enclosed. This is the coffee shop that's next to it. And this is all, like I said, this is all air-conditioned space. So next slide, please. Inside what we now know as the patio, this is what it would look like. This is that bridge that connects the two buildings. Next slide, please. This is the lobby of the administration building where the children come in. This is where you're currently coming in. You can see how big this becomes. What you're looking at is you're standing behind the reception counter as the people come in. Next slide. This is the coffee shop looking inside out to the patio area. These are the sliding panel doors that will open up into that area. Next slide. So the cost of this entire project, $6.5 million. Our campaign goal is $1.5 million, which would leave us a total of $5 million to get a loan for. I will tell you that one of the things that has really attracted me, not only just to Copper Hills, but to this program, was the fact that I could really see God's hands moving in here. Brad mentioned we were only in this building for 2 years, and look what's happened so far. I mean, we are now pushing the boundaries, and I think he's continuing to encourage us to continue to reach out into the community, to serve the community. My wife Pam and I are really excited about this. We're on board on this. This is a 12-month campaign. It's very, very accelerated. Someone had asked me the other day, how soon can we do this? When we raise the $1.5 million, we're going to start putting the shovel into the dirt. So we can do it that quickly. The needs are there, and I think that with God's help, we'll get this thing accomplished soon.
And if someone wanted to leave a check behind for 1.5 this morning, they could do that probably, right?
Just come see me.
Yeah.
I'll be happy to.
Dennis, thank you so much. What do you think, Dennis? Yeah. I was thinking as Dennis was saying that, and you know, the use of our facility already, this last year in 2017, 2,100 hours of our facility use was used by community organizations coming onto our campus from the state to the city. We have 3 homeowners associations that have their monthly meetings here on a regular basis. We have 3 or 4 Girl Scout troops that meet here, and just a variety of other purposes. This community already sees this building as belonging to them in many ways, and they're here on our campus, and they're experiencing Christ's love, and that's a win already. Now, I know you might have some questions, and this isn't really the environment to dialogue, question and answer, but we want to give you opportunities to ask your questions, gather more information. Maybe we can fill in a few things for you as well. And the way that we want to do that, if you're part of a life group, Dennis or myself are scheduled to come and visit you one of those evenings, and you can ask any questions that you would have at that point. But if you're not in a life group, this Thursday evening at 7 o'clock, and then again Saturday at 9 o'clock on campus, 2 different times, you don't have to come to both of those. If you've got questions, bring your questions. We're simply going to make ourselves available to answer those questions. We can explain in a little more detail what the uses will be and costs and and those kinds of things. So if you have those questions, there's a couple of opportunities for you. Over the next weeks, we're going to tell you a little more about it. We want to look a little more at John chapter 4 and what we can learn from Jesus and this story. And I want to take you back to that story for just a little bit. What do you think happened when this woman who met Jesus beside the well, who had come for water, this was a deep, clear well, 150 feet deep, excellent water. She knew where to get good water. But she ends up having her soul touched and her life transformed in that interaction with Jesus Christ. She goes back to town. She tries to explain to some friends, come with me. I've met a man who knows everything about me and he didn't condemn me. And though she didn't have like a pristine reputation, they saw enough in her that something had changed in her that they all come to town, from town, to have their encounter with Jesus Christ as well. And they do. It's really an amazing story. And as much as we look at pictures and floor plans and we hear of the need and all that, at the end of the day, That John 4 story is a story that we want to see happen over and over and over and over again in people's lives. It's a story just like this one.